Well, I'm excited. You know
are?
why? Yes.
No.
Because in this video, we're going to start talking about animation.
All right.
Yeah, cool stuff.
Time to start with animation. Now, this is not going to be a super in-depth video that concerns the nature of any certain kind of animation.
Sure, this is like a quick overview.
This is an overview of animation itself.
Yeah.
Now, what is animation, Bill? Now, I know we've asked you this question in these videos earlier, but now we're really going to kind of focus on your answer. What is animation?
Well, Zach, animation, as I like to think about it, is the changing of a value or a parameter over time.
What do you mean animation is not motion? It's not moving objects around?
Motion is one type of animation, but there are other types of animation as well.
Okay.
Like any sort of parameter in Max, you can animate.
Okay.
Anything that changes.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like, let's say, the rotation of a sphere.
Oh, that's still motion. Give me something that's not moving that we can animate.
Something that's not moving.
Mm-hmm.
How about the hemisphere or slice value of a sphere?
Or maybe the radius of a sphere.
Or the radius, sure.
Or maybe the RGB values of the color of a sphere.
Yeah,
on
there
a
you
given
go.
material.
Animating the color, psychedelic.
All sorts of cool stuff.
Sure.
Now, that's kind of the general idea of what we're going to be discussing in this video. Just kind of giving you an idea of what animation is and how it's achieved inside of 3ds Max. So for starters, we're going to go with what everybody knows, which is animation involving motion.
Sure.
If you would, Bill, create us a simple animation where a sphere just moves from one side of the grid to the other.
No problem. I can do that right away.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and click my sphere icon. You guys know how to do this. You've seen it a lot before.
Sure.
I'm going to go ahead and draw my sphere in the perspective viewport. I'll hit F4 to do wireframe on shaded.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to turn on auto key.
Okay.
And I think what I'll do is select W for my move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and slide my time slider all the way to the other side, frame 100, zoom out, and I'm going to move my sphere now and watch what happens down right here above the word, or above the number 100.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Yeah.
We have a little key that was automatically placed down there.
Exactly. So,
Pretty cool.
We'll talk more about keyframes and how they are placed a little bit later,
right?
Because that's actually something that kind of warrants its own discussion.
Right.
But
I kind of want to explain what I did as I went along.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to drag the time slider, you do now indeed have motion. Now, notice he did switch off the auto key button, which is again,
that's kind of a habit that I'm into as well.
That's another element of animation that we'll focus a little bit more heavily on once we start talking about keyframe animation more in depth. Now, you'll notice as the time slider is slid, or even as you hit play, we do indeed have motion. In this case, you shouldn't think of it as motion. You know, even in any kind of 3D animation, just somewhere in the back of your head, remember that it is a change in a parameter value over time.
Right. This X position down here, what we could see in the coordinate display, is actually what is changing.
That's right. There is a specific parameter, in this case position X, which is changing as time increments.
You can even see that right here.
Right. That is the nature of animation. Now, this is one type of animation available in 3ds Max. And we have a lot of different animation types available to us. This is keyframe animation.
Right.
And that means that we took two recordings of an attribute value at given times. We recorded where the ball was going to be at frame 0. We then recorded where the ball was going to be at frame 100.
Right.
And we allowed 3ds Max to interpolate the animation in between.
Ooh. Interpolate.
We'll talk more about interpolation and how it works and how you can control it as an animator a little bit later. But we have other types of animation as well. We have reactive animation, which doesn't involve time, but instead uses one attribute's value against another attribute's value.
Very cool.
To achieve animation. That's something that we'll really be focusing very directly on in a few more videos.
So in reactive animation, instead of time is the driving attribute, you just pick another attribute.
Exactly right. So let's say, for example, where currently, as we drag the time slider, we have a ball that's moving. You could set up a situation where as you move one object, another object rotates to coincide.
Sure.
Essentially what you're doing with reactive animation is establishing relationships between two objects, or between two attributes, to be more precise.
Okay.
And then it is very much like keyframe animation, and we'll demonstrate the similarities between the two once we get deeper into reactive animation.
So you could say that this reactive animation is time independent until that driver itself is keyed.
That's right.
Cool.
We also have nonlinear animation. And this is where we can take clips or blocks of animation, and we can apply them to given objects. It's like, let's say, for example, we had an animation of a motion-captured walk cycle, somebody walking across a room. We could take that animation and apply it to a character. Mm-hmm. We could repeat that animation indefinitely with an offset to make a character walk out into the distance.
Very cool.
A lot of different ways you can work on nonlinear animation. Now, this is not something we're going to be focusing on probably too heavily at all in this class.
Sure.
That'd be something for later on down the road, perhaps in a specialized animation class. But I do want to mention it. Nonlinear animation definitely has its place in the 3D animation workplace. We also have path animation.
Now, that's neat.
Path animation is something that, whether or not you're even at all involved with 3D, it's very easy to understand. This is where you would create a three-dimensional path in space, very much like a curve.
Okay.
And you would assign an object to follow that path over time. So you could draw a curve that kind of snaked through a building and then attach a camera to it and thereby create a camera fly-through of a building that you
created. Pretty awesome. So you can actually draw your own path and then animate an object along it.
Absolutely. We have dynamic animation, and this is where we as animators kind of step aside and bring in the laws of physics. We can use things like friction, gravity, how bouncy an object is, how stretchy it may be, and actually create dynamic animation based on physical attributes that happens automatically.
Sure. So it's sort of like setting up a simulation and letting Max do its thing to animate.
Exactly.
Very cool.
We have expressions where we can create mathematical functions that actually produce animation. We can also involve scripts in these in expressions. So that, we can start bringing in things like Max script to have various functions that only Max can do brought in and take place during animation. Very, very cool stuff. We also have constraints where you can literally tell one object to kind of listen to another object.
Sure.
Where you can maybe take two objects and constrain their positions together so that as you move one, another one comes right along to coincide with it. And we'll talk more about constraints a little bit later.
Okay.
Now, underneath all of our different types of animation we have available inside of Max, we have animation using controllers.
Sure.
Now, I mentioned this last because it's kind of the most important. All the different methods of animation that I've mentioned, being keyframe, reactive, nonlinear, path, dynamic, expressions, constraints, they are all involving controllers. Now, we're going to be talking a lot more in depth about exactly what controllers are a little bit later. Right now, we'll just kind of keep it very general. A controller is something that handles an animation task in some form or another.
Sure.
It can be something that actually holds your keyframe animation and allows you to create keyframe animation. It can be something that holds a mathematic expression that you type in by hand.
Okay.
It can be something that already has pre-coded algorithms, things like a sine wave value, so that you can plug like a waveform into an object and make it move up and down based on a sine wave.
Sure.
A lot of different ways you can apply, adjust, and control controllers in your scene. We're going to be talking a lot more about that a little bit later. For now, we'll just kind of keep things simple and make sure they have been mentioned and that you're aware of them.
So you could almost say that a controller is a type of black box that all of these different types of animation use to get the results that we want.
That's a great analogy. And again, we'll be talking a lot more about controllers just a little bit later. But that really, for now, is going to kind of wrap things up as far as what I want to discuss. I do want to kind of make one little, I guess, a demonstration of some of the things that we mentioned, though, because I did say that we could animate a lot more than just motion.
Sure.
An object's particular location in space. Let me go ahead and make this viewport nice and big. Let's come over here to frame 0. I'm going to switch on Auto Key, and let's go into our Modify panel. And, we were talking about animating parameters as well.
Sure.
Let's take maybe our radius, and we'll set it down to somewhere around 13. And then we'll drag forward here to about frame 50, and we'll just bump this up, make it nice and big. And then we'll come back here to frame 100, and we'll pull this way back down again.
I notice you have a little red outline around the bracket there.
That's right. Max is telling us that this parameter has been animated.
Cool.
So now if I switch off Auto Key, just out of habit, we can rewind and hit play, and watch what happens. Our sphere gets bigger and then gets smaller. So that's an attribute that is changing over time. It's not motion anyway.
Yeah. But it's just another attribute.
That's right. You got to remember, that's all animation is, a change in a parameter's value over time. And we'll be using different terms. We'll say attribute value. We'll say parameter value.
Sure.
We mean the same thing.
Right.
An attribute is a parameter.
It's like a numerical value that we can key or change.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's going to wrap things up for this brief introduction to animation. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.